Jesus Christus, Vatican and World News.
Today, Thursday, May 13th, is the solemnity of the Ascension of our Lord, and these are the headlines. We recall today the 40th anniversary of the assassination attempt on Pope St. John Paul II. Calls for an end to violence pour in as the death toll in the conflict between Israel and Palestine continues to rise. And Pope Francis says that the Church is at her most beautiful when she values each of the three states of life. In the Vatican, I'm Father Benedict Mayaki. Today, 40 years ago, an assassination attempt on Pope St. John Paul II took place in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican. Pope John Paul II was shot and seriously wounded as he passed in an open car among thousands of faithful gathered in the square during the general audience on the 13th of May 1981, the liturgical feast of Our Lady of Fatima. The then 60-year-old pontiff was rushed to Rome's Gemelli Hospital, where he underwent successful emergency surgery. Recalling the incident, Pope Francis, in his greetings to Polish pilgrims at the general audience yesterday, said that Pope John Paul II was certain that he owed his life to Our Lady of Fatima, and that this makes us aware that our lives and the history of the world are in God's hands. Vatican Radio's retired English program director Sean Patrick Lovett recalls the events of that day. At the time, he was a 24-year-old journalist working at the Papal Radio.
It was 20 minutes past 5. How do I know? Because the gunshots rang out at 17 minutes past 5. And that's easy to remember because in international time it's 17:17. And 17, if you live in Italy, is a very unlucky number. It's the equivalent of our Anglo-Saxon unlucky 13. So it was 17 minutes past 5 o'clock when those four gunshots rang out in St. Peter's Square. No, I was not doing the live radio commentary because there was no live English commentary at that time, and the Italian commentary hadn't started yet because the Pope was still doing his second round of the square and saying hi to the crowds and so forth. And he had just picked up Sara Bartoli. That is her name. She's in her nearly 40 today. She was a few months old, and she's the curly-haired little girl you see in the black and white pictures. And she's credited with, well, yes, one of the reasons why the Pope didn't die. Of course, he credits Our Lady of Fatima, and has good reason to do so, May 13th being her feast day. But he had literally handed Sara Bartoli, this little girl, back to her parents, and one of the theories is that that's what made Ali Ajka lose his aim. Because he was waiting for that moment, and when he shot, he missed.
That was retired English program director Sean Patrick Lovett speaking about his memory of the 13th of May, 1981. Pope Francis has written the preface to a book exploring the theology of consecrated life, which hits bookshelves on Friday. The Pope says that the Church is at her most beautiful when she values each of the three states of life, the single, married, and consecrated states. Devin Watkins has that story.
Like salt and yeast, Notes for a Theology of the Consecrated Life of the Church hits the bookshelves of the Vatican Publishing House on Friday and bears a preface by Pope Francis. The book was written by two Italian Franciscan priests who seek to take stock of the Church's teaching on a range of topics related to the consecrated life. In his preface for the new book, Pope Francis begins by laying out why the Church can be considered beautiful. The Church is beautiful because she is loved by her bridegroom and Lord, he says, and the love of the bridegroom has made her fruitful, beautiful, and happy. Launching into the topic of consecrated life, the Pope points out that the Church has always been composed of three states of life: the single life, married life, and consecrated life. He adds that these are not three separate compartments in constant competition or even three islands in a vast ocean. The holy people of God discern well, he says, when within itself it can count three brothers or even three splendid creatures who support each other and give themselves to each other in order to help the other grow. Pope Francis goes on to note that throughout the Church's history, one or another of the three states of life has been held up as the best, offering a guaranteed path to holiness. He says this tendency has often coincided with a dark time in the Church's human affairs, leading to abuse and misguided claims. The Pope adds that proponents of the consecrated life have, at various times in history, claimed a form of autonomy with respect to the other two states of life. He says this presumption risks making the Church a jumble of self-referential subjects. Each becomes proud and presumptuous of their own prerogatives, he says, forgetting that one arrives first when all three subjects arrive together at the same goal. The Pope then praises the book as written by an experienced and proven theologian who examines the magisterium with the purity of a neophyte. He is assisted by a younger confrere who is a liturgist, a lover of theology and spirituality, and a longtime dear friend of the Pope. Pope Francis concludes his preface expressing his desire that the book might help us to deepen our understanding of the mystery of the hierarchical Holy Mother Church. I'm Devin Watkins.
Pope Francis on Tuesday instituted the lay ministry of catechists to encourage greater participation of laymen and women in the Church. The Pope said that fidelity to the past and responsibility for the present are necessary conditions for the Church to carry out her mission in the world. As Robin Gomes reports, Indian Catholics have welcomed this move of the Pope.
We wholeheartedly thank the Holy Father and welcome the gesture by him for recognizing our foot soldiers, who are the actual personnel helping in evangelization and spreading the good news of the Church, said Bishop Gerald John Matthias of Lucknow. A member of the Office for Laity of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of India, Bishop Matthias said that the lay catechists are the people who actually bring the first message of Christianity to the ordinary people before the priest or religious people come and carry forward the works done by the catechists. In his May 11th apostolic letter, the Holy Father insists that the ministry of catechist be a commitment that must, however, be carried out in full secular manner, avoiding any form of clericalization. In many parts of the world, especially in communities without a resident priest or religious men and women, catechists are the leaders nurturing the faith of the local Catholic community. Sanjay Tirki, a catechist in the Archdiocese of Ranchi, said they are in the forefront of evangelization work for years, but they are hardly recognized by the Church and the faithful. So Pope Francis' recognition of lay catechists will give us a status in the Church, he told You Can News. According to Father Manikya Raju, Secretary of the Commission for Catechetics in Delhi Archdiocese, the new ministry will give lay catechists a morale boost to their hard work. Priests and religious nuns also engage in catechetical work, but they have limitations in distance, language and culture, where local catechists become handy, he said. According to Turkey, a catechist's job is not easy. In some places where people are opposed to Christianity, he said, catechists are even threatened. Some have even been killed for their faith, he added. I am Robin Gomes.
Keeping up with the Church's growing communication needs is the objective for Saturday 15 and Sunday 16th May, when Catholics in the United States are invited to support the U.S. Bishops' Communications Campaign. The day was chosen to coincide with the 55th World Day for Social Communications. Francesca Merlo reports.
The USCCB's Catholic Communications Campaign coincides with the 55th World Day of Social Communications on the theme, Come and See, communicating by meeting people where and as they are. Archbishop Gregory Hart-Mayer, chairman of the USCCB's subcommittee on the Catholic Communication Campaign, explained that the campaign allows the Church to continue to promote Jesus' message of faith, hope and healing through the mass media. Half of the funds raised through the CCC are allocated to the donor diocese in support of local evangelization projects. The other half goes towards Catholic communication activities at the national level or for developing countries. In a statement, the USCCB writes that in 2020 the COVID-19 pandemic presented a perfect storm, with increasing demand for support from the Catholic Communication Campaign, while at the same time most parishioners were unable to attend Mass due to COVID-related restrictions the weekend of the collection. That situation resulted in a significant decline in giving to the CCC, which is trending down by more than half. However, Archbishop Hart-Mayer added that thanks in part to the technologies that allowed the streaming of celebrations, the faithful remained spiritually connected even in times of physical distancing. In fact, the USCCB used campaign funds to help dioceses and parishes live stream masses, while the bishop's website was redesigned, making it mobile friendly so that it was easier to access the daily readings and reflections on scripture. The pandemic is not the only crisis to which the campaign is responding. The bishops recall that the initiative has made it possible to organise online roundtables on racism, arms control and care for creation in order to engage the faithful on relevant moral and social issues. Gifts to this collection, says Archbishop Hart-Mayer, will bring the message of Jesus to your community and to communities on the other side of the world. So, he concludes, Please give generously, knowing that you are continuing the work of the apostles. I am Francesca Merlo.
In India, the coronavirus death toll crossed 250,000 on Wednesday in the deadliest 24 hours since the pandemic began, as the disease rampaged through the countryside, leaving families to weep over the dead in rural hospitals or camping wards to tend the sick. The second wave erupted in February, inundating hospitals and medical staff, as well as crematoriums and mortuaries. Experts still cannot say for sure when numbers will peak, and concern is growing about the transmittability of the variant, which is driving infections in India and spreading worldwide. Indian state leaders are clamoring for vaccines to stop the second wave and the devastation it has wrought, urging Prime Minister Narendra Modi to stop exporting doses, ramp up production, and help them procure urgent supplies from overseas. And finally, as another night of violence rocks southern Israel and Gaza, aid agencies are calling on all parties to end all violence and de-escalate tensions. Already, several dozens have lost their lives in the escalation, which began on Monday and has triggered street violence in Israel between Jews and Israeli Arabs. Lydia O'Kane tells us more.
It was another night of violence as Hamas launched rocket barrages at southern Israel. Thousands of Israelis took refuge in shelters as sirens blared in Tel Aviv. Early on Thursday, Israel renewed airstrikes on Gaza, destroying a residential tower block. With no end in sight to these hostilities, Israel said it was preparing ground troops along the Gaza border. 7 people have been killed in Israel and at least 67 in Gaza since violence escalated on Monday. Israel launched its offensive after Hamas fired rockets at Jerusalem and Tel Aviv in retaliation for Israeli police clashes with Palestinians near the Al-Aqsa Mosque in East Jerusalem during the fasting month of Ramadan. With the international community fearing the violence could spiral out of control, US President Joe Biden planned to send envoy Hadi Amir for talks with Israel and Palestinians. As the violence rages on, it is the innocent who are suffering. According to UN children's agency UNICEF, at least 14 children in the state of Palestine and 1 child in Israel have reportedly been killed since Monday. Another 95 children in Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and 3 children in Israel have reportedly been injured in the past 5 days. In a statement, the Director General of the agency, Henrietta Fore, called on all parties to end all violence and de-escalate tensions. The UK-based Catholic aid agency CAFOD said the only way out of the cycle of violence and for Israelis and Palestinians to be truly secure is to revive hope for a just Israeli-Palestinian peace process aimed at creating the conditions for a stable peace based on justice where all must be treated equally. Meanwhile, the charity Save the Children said at least 5 schools in Gaza were damaged and school has been suspended in southern Israel. Jason Lee, director for the Palestinian territories at the charity, said children are terrified. With the situation at a dangerous tipping point, Save the Children is also calling on all parties to the conflict to adhere to their obligations under international law and to take extra precautions not to target the civilian population, particularly children. I'm Lydia O'Kane.
That brings us to the end of this edition of Vatican and World News. For more on these and other stories, we invite you to visit our web portal at www.vaticannews.va. My thanks go to our producers and to our technicians in studio. In the Vatican, I'm Father Benedict Mayaki.